What's going on YouTube? It's Deej, back again with another video, and today we are reacting to the 33rd team's latest 2023 NFL mock draft. Hey, it's Mock Draft Monday, so want to take a look at another mock draft that we could react and grade. And then just in case you don't know who the 33rd team is, I think this is a really interesting organization. It's made up of former players, coaches, execs, GMs, things like that. There's a few, media members like a Trey Wingo and Ari Meirov and stuff like that, but this is largely an organization of former NFL entities. So I'm really interested to see what their insight is in this mock draft. I have done my best to not see any of the picks. The only reason I might know what is coming is because when you load up this website, they have all these video pop-ups and whatnot. And I don't know if you get annoyed by, just one video pop-up, coming up in your browser, but then 18 all at once is a little extreme. So one little piece of advice to anybody who might be working at the 33rd team that might be seeing this. Doubtful, but nonetheless, let's go ahead and jump into this. Their latest 2023 mock kicks things off with a trade to number 1. They have the Colts moving up to that spot, and you can even see the trade details that they have in here. So I think all that makes sense. And even just looking at the compensation, 1, 2, 3, and a future 1. I think if you're a Colts fan, that's pretty modest when it comes to draft compensation. I've been floating out 2 1s, 2 2s. So flip one of those 2s and make it a 3. Not too bad. If you're a Colts fan, let me know what you would think about that haul. And then that gets you Will Levis. So interesting. I have done this before. And honestly, if I do something where Indy moves up to 1 and takes somebody other than Bryce Young, I'm going to probably make it CJ Stroud. I have Levis just ahead of Stroud, but I kind of see them as 2A, 2B. Depends on what weakness, what potential flaws in their game do you want to try to correct, because it's drastically different. But if they did make this move up to 1, I think it does make some sense. Chris Ballard trying to swing for the fences. If you're going to get 4 draft picks to move up to 1, why take the guy with the highest floor? As great as that is right away, instead, let's go take a big swing of the bat, try to get the guy with the highest ceiling, Will Levis. I think you can certainly make the argument for that. Also, comfortable playing in an NFL offense. His last 2 OCs at Kentucky, former NFL OCs. So you feel comfortable about this guy being able to come into your offense and be able to run it at a high level pretty much immediately. But yeah, I mean, if Jeff Saturday becomes the head coach of the Colts, it's pretty clear to me that this isn't even Chris Ballard really pulling the strings. It's Jim Irsay making it all happen. So we'll see. But man, if they move up to 1, that'd be interesting, especially if they took Levis. And that, makes it easier. Then Houston, I think they would take Bryce Young if they had the number 1 pick. So Young falls to their lap. It'll allow you to see what this Caserio rebuild really is all about. Pair up Bryce Young with DeMeco Ryans. I mean, if you're a Houston fan, the hiring of Ryans and then the drafting of Bryce Young, if it were to play out like this, this would give Houston sports fans in general, because the Rockets suck, right? Baseball's not necessarily great there in the great state of Texas, but this would give Houston fans something to be excited about for the first time in a couple of years. So I think this would be a fantastic pick there. Then we get a trade here for 3, so it's the Raiders moving up to 3. So I've had some mocks where the Cardinals have moved back down to 9. That was actually what I did in this past weekend's mock, so check it out if you missed it. But nonetheless, here it's flipping places with the Raiders. Cardinals get an extra 2nd, 3rd, and a 4th. Basically it's just a pick swap there in the 3rd and a pick swap 4 for a 5. So, in my trade, I had Arizona getting a little bit more from Carolina, but nonetheless, here you're falling down a little bit, little less of a fall down the board. And then the Raiders take CJ Stroud. I could totally see this happening because, like I've been saying over and over again, if I'm Mark Davis, hey, we're moving on from Derek Carr. This guy took us to the playoffs a handful of times. What's your alternative, Josh McDaniels, Dave Ziegler? What do you have that's better than that? I'm all ears. So moving up to 3 and getting one of the big 3 quarterbacks in this class, I think is certainly plausible. Allows you to kind of reset, where this franchise is going moving forward. I do think they'll be in on the Aaron Rodgers market. I feel like the Jets probably have the front-running position. They're in that polling position, so to speak. But, I think the Raiders are plausible. I think Green Bay is still somewhere there in the cards. We'll see. That one feels a little less likely every day that goes by. But if the Raiders did miss out on Rodgers, getting Stroud, giving him a great supporting cast around him, and also, poo-poo on Josh McDaniels all you want as a head coach. The guy's a good play caller. He's a good OC. He's kind of got that Bill O'Brien in him. It's something about these New England coaches that in their defined coordinator roles, they're not bad. It's just when they try to do more than that things don't work out. But nonetheless, putting CJ Stroud in a Josh McDaniels offense and a system that is pretty QB friendly with that much supporting cast around him and that much talent around him, I think this would be a great spot to see Stroud go. Let me get to pick number 4. The Bears take Will Anderson. I've been going Jalen Carter, but it's a nice little change of pace here, something a little different here on the channel. So Will Anderson, the pick there for Chicago, wouldn't hate this whatsoever. Whether it's Carter or Anderson, it's an A to me. So won't talk about it too long. And that gives Seattle Jalen Carter, I would assume. Yep, that's exactly what's going to happen. This is a slam dunk for Seattle, especially when you consider, like, if you add Will Anderson, this is ultimately something similar to what I had in my last mock over the weekend. Then it was Will Anderson I had going 5. And that leaves kind of the edge group for Seattle a little light. Boye Mafe, Uchenna Nwosu, Will Anderson. None of those guys really big and high-level run stopper. Anderson plays the run better than what his size might suggest, but like adding a Tyree Wilson is like, that dude is an edge setter. So if Anderson ended up being the pick to 5 for Seattle, you take it because he's one of the best non-quarterbacks in this draft class for sure. But here with Carter, like, that concern goes out the window because this guy's going to give you pass rush, run stopping production right there in the middle where they have a glaring hole. And then you can still play Mafe and Uchenna Nwosu on the other side. So yeah, this would be an 8 pick, no doubt about it. 6 pick, Lions take Tyree Wilson. I think this makes a ton of sense. This or Myles Murphy just comes down to preference. I think both those guys have, the ability to kick inside, play that 3-4 DN spot, or if you're in passing situation, you're running nickel, you're running dime, 4-man front, they can kick inside and be that, rushing interior rusher right over the guard. So I think there's good flexibility there. Murphy's probably a little bit more of a work in progress rather. Tyree Wilson played 5 years in college, good production at Texas Tech last year. He's probably the guy who you can trust to get a little bit more out of right away. So I can see the Lions, Dan Campbell, they finished over 500 by the year's end, but now it's like, hey, let's make this playoff push. So I could see him wanting to go the more NFL ready guy versus a Myles Murphy. So then pick 7, this is the Cardinals moving down. They get Myles Murphy. So you move down 4 spots and you still get one of the best edge rushers in this draft class. Yes, a work in project, but inside-out versatility allows you to keep Myjai Sanders and Cam Thomas in the rotation and in the mix, so I like that a ton. And this is an Arizona team. We'll see when the head coaching hire is made, but especially if they trade DeAndre Hopkins, this is a team signaling that, hey, the winning window is no longer here and now. It's like 2 years from now. So let's go ahead and get a guy who, if all works out, in that 2-year duration could turn into an absolute freak on the edge, but also a guy who can kick inside, play that 3-4 DN spot. Same thing I talked about Wilson. If you're on passing situations, running that nickel, running dime, line up over the guard, and could be a force to be reckoned with because there are not many guards who will be able to keep up with how quick Myles Murphy can move. So yeah, love this fit. I think this is a great spot for the Cardinals and Murphy. It feels like their timelines match up really well. At 8, we get Broderick Jones to the Falcons. Interesting. So, Caleb McGarry had a pretty good season. Jake Matthews continues to play pretty solid football, but could you get better there? Sure. Broderick Jones is the first tackle of the board. It's one that I'm not necessarily going to get behind. Right now, he's my OT4. Has the size, has the strength. I just think he's raw as a pass protector. And I've said this 1,000 times on the channel, so I won't drone on too much about it if you're, familiar. But nonetheless, I get why the NFL likes him because, again, there's not many people built like Broderick Jones. There's not many tackles, if any tackle in this class, as strong as Broderick Jones. So I understand it. I almost wonder if the Falcons could play him at guard maybe. But that being said, Chris Lindstrom's coming off an awesome season. They do have another guard that's a free agent and, Elijah Wilkinson. So maybe that's, a way to get him on the field quick, get him some experience, and then maybe he becomes a tackle of the future. Maybe, but he also might be a little too big to be a guard. So it kind of leaves me up in the air. Don't love it, don't hate it, I suppose, for Atlanta. Then at 9, got another trade. So we got the Jets moving up to number 9. Carolina moves back 4 spots, picks up a 3rd rounder. I think that's totally plausible. And the Jets take Paris Johnson Jr. So, after you see Jones come off the board, I can see a world where the Jets are like, hey, let's get to it before the slide happens. And whether it's Peter Skoronski or Paris Johnson Jr., that feels like, where the Jets are going to go right about now. And pretty much those two guys have made up every first-round Jet selection of the last 5 to 6 mocks I've done. So, it makes a lot of sense to me. Would rather not see them move up, especially considering they traded back into the first round last year. They moved up in the second round to get Breece Hall. The first round move was for Jermaine Johnson. So they're starting to get, they already, utilized some of those assets to make those moves last year. So I'd, rather see them stick and pick at 13. But they feel like they need to move up 4 spots. You're only sacrificing a 3rd. It's not terrible. And you get a guy who, to me, OT1 in this class, 6'6", 315, great feet as well. Very high-end athlete, especially given his size. Great as a first-year starter at tackle. Was solid as a guard before that. So it gives you a little bit of position versatility. Feels like the exact way the Jets want to approach the first round. Then the Eagles at 10, they take Joey Porter Jr. I would love this. I know some Eagles fans are not crazy about it because, hey, if we're going to get Bradbury back, do we need an outside corner? I would say there's no guarantee you get Bradbury back. So until we get to free agency, I think this is a fair fit and a fair position group for Philly to target. Then you bring Bradbury back, then it becomes kind of a day two, third round type of position focus. But Joey Porter Jr., I would love to see this. And first corner off the board, if memory serves. I don't think we've seen the other corners come off yet. So would love this. I'm a big Joey Porter Jr. guy. I think the man press ability is inherently there. Got better year over year at Penn State, and I do think he's a good enough athlete to play in a zone-heavy scheme. So Jonathan Gannon's going to be back as a DC. A lot of quarters in there, and I think with that size and arm length, Joey Porter Jr. would be an awesome addition if they did move on or lose out on Bradbury this free agency. The Titans take Quentin Johnston. I did this in my last mock. Man, I just the more I think about it, the more I just want to see. Even if it's Ryan Tannehill, like he's good enough to get the job done, but I just want to see a Titans, play action focus because defenses have to focus on Derrick Henry. He is a force to be reckoned with. He's still running hard at his age. So, you force defenses to put onus and put, focus onto that. And then play action off of that is Treylon Burks at 6'3" and, runs high 4.4s, 4.5s. Or Quentin Johnston on the other side, 6'4", 215, 220, and runs 4.3 speed, at least low 4.4s. I mean, good luck. I'd love to see that. Both guys have good size, good body control, can go up and win it in the air. They're both great satellite weapons. Like Treylon Burks is a tank, and then for whatever reason, Quentin Johnston, even with that frame, he's so skinny built, but he is slippery as it gets, and maybe that's part of it. But yeah, I mean, that feels like a really fun compliment in a team that needs to get better wide receiver. I wouldn't be surprised if Robert Woods is gone. So if you have Johnston and Burks on the outside, maybe Westbrook-Ikhine then becomes the slot guy. I think that rounds out that wide receiver room pretty well. Then we get to the Houston Texans, Jordan Addison. So we get two receivers here in the top 12. I'm not entirely sure that happens. It's not a wide receiver class like the last 3 years, really. I think this is a class that, I think one might go 11, 12, Tennessee and Houston. But then I think we might get a little bit of a break till we get to the mid-teens. New England at 14's live for sure, but I think once you get to the back half of the teens into the 20s, that's when wide receivers start flying off the board. But hey, if we did get two in the top 12, mad respect. I mean, these are my top two wide receivers. You're going to see my wide receiver rankings later this week. So a little spoiler alert there. These guys go 1 and 2 in my rankings, but it's close between Addison and Zay Flowers, who I hope to see later on in this. But for Houston, hey, I mean, this feels like the number one wide receiver you're missing, right? Like, a sharp route runner, a guy who can win the intermediate and deeper parts of the field. You're probably moving on from Brandon Cooks. So then you can envision a wide receiver room with Addison headlining it. The other outside wide receivers, Nico Collins, and then ideally you're getting John Mechie III back and healthy playing that slot in his recovery from leukemia. So that is a really fun, young, and promising wide receiver core to build around Bryce Young. So I'm here for it if they do make this selection. Then we get to pick 13, the Carolina Panthers, after moving back 4 spots, take Anthony Richardson. I mean, this is as ideal as it gets. You get an extra third-round pick and Anthony Richardson. That's talking about playing the board there. Yes, I know Anthony Richardson's going to be, a work in progress. I don't even know if he can see the field right away. So as much as Carolina fans are probably ready to not see Sam Darnold under center, you might be looking at him for the first, half of next year if this were to play out like this. But man, I think Anthony Richardson's going to go top 10, top half the first round pretty safely. I just think the upside is something that the NFL is going to have a hard time passing on. Now, where he goes, Carolina, Washington, we'll have to wait and see how the QB market plays out in free agency with some of the trade candidates as well, Carl Rodgers, et cetera, et cetera. So, well, a little bit of a holding pattern here, but if Carolina got an extra third and Anthony Richardson on top of that, I'd be here for it. I think Richardson's, worth taking that risk on. It may not work out, but if it does, there's going to be a lot of happy fans in that Carolina fan base. Then we get to pick 14, the Patriots taking Peter Skoronski. I think this makes a ton of sense. Could be a left tackle in the future. You move Trent Brown back to the right side. I think this absolutely works. And if you needed to in a pinch, I guess he could play guard. But realistically, with Isaiah Wynn almost certainly, coming out or leaving the door, it's going to be Skoronski at left tackle if this were to play out, and then Brown plays right tackle. So the Patriots are a tough team because I want to give them a wide receiver in the first round, especially considering I don't think this receiver class has a ton of depth into it. So, I kind of want to give him a wide receiver at 14, but often tackle's a glaring need, and 14's a great position to land at Broderick Jones, or Peter Skoronski, or Paris Johnson Jr. I'd also like corner or Brian Branch. Like Devon Witherspoon, Brian Branch to me just like scream New England, New England defensive cornerstones. But again, wide receiver and offensive tackle are also glaring needs staring me in the face. So New England's a tough team. I would love to see them get Peter Skoronski. And then at 15, we get the Packers taking Michael Mayer. I've done this a handful of times. I've taken a little bit of a break from it just to kind of give Packers fans a little bit of a release from it. But nonetheless, whether it's Lucas Van Ness, Nolan Smith, or Michael Mayer, edge, tight end, I feel like are the position groups I'm most looking at here. Could be corner, maybe safety. I'd be interested in if Brian Branch were the pick here, that'd be fascinating. But nonetheless, if they add Michael Mayer, another young piece there in the receiving core with a Christian Watson, with a Romeo Doubs to help either keep Aaron Rodgers in town or to try to boost the supporting cast for Jordan Love. I'm really interested to see what Love's all about if he is the guy under center next year for Green Bay. I think adding Michael Mayer only makes that situation around him that much better. Next up, Washington Commanders, Devon Witherspoon. Yeah, it feels like the Commanders going first round offensive tackle, cornerback. Makes a lot of sense. I do think offensive tackle is somewhere they could go. I went Mayer this past weekend, but that was the first time I'd done that. So just kind of playing around with different fits and potential destinations for Mayer. But yeah, corner and offensive tackle, I think kind of staring me in the face for Washington. I think those are the most glaring positions I think they could address. Specifically when it comes to the offensive line, I'm still a big Sam Cosmi guy. I think there's something to work with there at right tackle, and I think Charles Leno has a couple years ahead of him. If Peter Skoronski fell here and he could be your left guard, immediately, and then potential left tackle of the future, I think that's the most ideal spot. I'm just not sure he makes it all the way to 16. So in that case, Devon Witherspoon, I think this is a slam dunk. Get you a nice man press corner on the other side. I think he can play in a cover 3 heavy defense like Jack Del Rio's. Pair him up with Benjamin St. Juste. You have some good size and some good young talent there on the outside moving forward. Then we get to the Steelers. Trenton Simpson. I actually had this as the first pick of the second round in my mock this weekend. So here at 17, I also think it makes sense. It's just, hey, if you get him at 32, that's just way better value. But Devin Bush, a free agent. Miles Jack, I think was solid, serviceable last year, but long term, who's that guy in the middle of the defense? And Pittsburgh has kind of long been known for their inside linebackers, so there is some traditional weight behind that position. So I could see Mike Tomlin being like, we need to find that guy. And if it was Trenton Simpson, I wouldn't be mad. I'd rather go corner or tackle here if I'm a Steelers fan, and I am. But nonetheless, if they went linebacker, I wouldn't be upset, especially considering you can probably get a tackle or corner there at 32. This is a deep corner class, so you can even take tackle at 32, first pick of the second round. And then round 3, there's probably a solid corner you can get your hands on and get them out on the field pretty quick. So playing the board maybe, so to speak, here and taking Trenton Simpson at 17 would not hate it whatsoever. And then the Lions at 18 take Christian Gonzalez. Yeah, that would be a slam dunk fit. Man press ability off the charts. I think that's exactly what Aaron Glenn wants in a corner. So whether it's Witherspoon, Gonzalez, Porter Jr., I think this is kind of a great draft class for Detroit to get an upgrade there on the outside. But also I think a guy who can be a fluid mover and a high-level zone player. 6'2", long arms, will run the 4.3s. There's a lot to like about Gonzalez, and I love that fit for Detroit. Next up, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They take Byron Young from Tennessee. Okay, interesting. So we have 2 Byron Youngs in this class. One from Tennessee, one from Alabama. Young is a little bit more of an edge. Could be inside-out guy. Could play that 3-4 outside linebacker or 3-4 D end. It'll be interesting to see what he does, weight-wise, add or lose or stay in that tweener state. And then Byron Young of Alabama is much more of that interior defensive lineman. But yeah, this would be an interesting fit. I've been saying for years that Tampa Bay needs to add, to that edge rush spot. Even if Shaq Barrett's healthy, they need a third edge. Because when it's Barrett and Tryon Shoyinka, sometimes those guys just aren't enough. So I think adding a third guy into a rotation, keeping them fresh, adds a little bit. I think it makes their role just easier essentially. But also, like, if Shaq Barrett doesn't come back the same or gets hurt again, you have a better contingency plan in place. So I would love to see them go edge there at 19. Then at 20, we get Keely Ringo to the Seahawks. I know a lot of Seattle fans are like, hey, John Schneider and Pete Carroll don't take corners in the first round. I hear you. I would say this is the most unique corner class for them because I don't know if in my lifetime, which, in my mid-20s, so it's not as extravagant as some, but there has not been a draft class that's been loaded with these 6'1+ corners, which feel uniquely Seattle driven just because, the Legion of Boom and, Brandon Browning and, Richard Sherman, these long, tall, lanky corners that, that feels like a big part of the DNA that was the Legion of Boom. So now you have an opportunity to draft one of those guys in the first round. So, I know Tariq Woolen worked, and I know Richard Sherman worked, these, day 3 picks that really became big hits. But imagine drafting a guy who looks and feels like a Seattle corner, but with first round talent and potential. I think this is the year to maybe take the swing of the bat, and adding a Keely Ringo opposite of Tariq Woolen would make that secondary scary, because then you move Kobe Bryant into the slot. You already have a really nice safety rotation, and we took Jalen Carter here at 5 in this mock. mean, that Seattle defense starts to look really kind of scary to face week in, week out. Find an upgrade there at linebacker, and you're addressing all three levels at a pretty high efficiency rate. Then we get to the Dolphins. They forfeited their pick, so whatever. Chargers take Jalen Hyatt. I've been looking for them to add a speed receiver. I'd rather see this be Zay Flowers over Jalen Hyatt, but I know Hyatt has plenty of fans, so I respect it. I just think he runs a little bit more of a limited route tree versus Flowers, and I think his production was kind of inflated by the Josh Heupel offense versus Zay Flowers. Not as good a quarterback play, not as good of a system. He kind of had to do it all by himself. So I'd rather see Zay Flowers be the pick here, but I think the thought and the concept is there, especially now changing OCs. Let's get that speed wide receiver. Let's get that last missing element I think the Chargers offense has been lacking the last couple of years. Then for the Ravens, Bijan Robinson. It's not what I've done, but I think it could make a lot of sense. We'll see what the OC change, entails for Baltimore. But if this was Greg Roman, I could see him just salivating at the idea of I could have a backfield of Lamar, J.K. Dobbins, and Bijan Robinson, which those three guys all in the same backfield does sound insane. And running a triple option with that. Oh my God! Bring back NCAA football so I can make that happen, and they are bringing that game back, so I'm excited. I'll do just that. But nonetheless, in all seriousness here, I just think wide receiver is a bigger need. Even corner, I'd rather go there, but it's tough because Bijan's going to go first round. I think he goes top half the first round. It's just where is that fit? Where does he go? And it's always hard to tell, and you don't want to keep doing it the same fan base because you're going to start pissing them off because they want to see something else. So it's tricky. The Ravens do, I think, make sense, but we'll have to see what that OC change really entails because they might also be going for more three receiver sets. Greg Roman was, one of the offensive coordinators who used that at a lower percentage across the league. So they will get more three receivers, and you don't need that second back. I think Dobbins looked great since his return from injury. Gus Edwards has given him a lot of good football as well. If those guys stay healthy, I think you already kind of have your backfield set. So don't hate it, don't love it either. But let's move on to the Vikings at 24. Manuel Forbes, I think this makes a ton of sense. Corner is, I think, the biggest need Minnesota has. Edge depth, off-ball linebacker, basically the entire defense. They can get better. Defensive tackle, too. But, hey, Forbes here, a guy who played 3 years at Mississippi State, great ball production. And, getting a guy in the SEC who plays as a true freshman, I think, is a huge tip of the cap and a huge feather in his cap. So, yeah, I think this guy is bound for the first round. Kind of feels like one of those mid to late 20s type of dudes, solid size, 6 foot, 190, and obviously, again, a glaring need for Minnesota. Also a fun connection because Cam Dantzler, former Mississippi State corner. Don't believe there was any overlap, but, yeah, Mississippi State's kind of become a nice program for developing corners because also MJ Emerson coming off a really good year with the Browns. So kind of emerging that DBU conversation. I don't know if they're overtaking Ohio State and LSU, Alabama yet, but hey, they're poking their head in the room. Let me get to the Jags. Brian Branch. I would love this fit. I would absolutely adore this fit. My one, and especially actually, let me build off of that. Rayshawn Jenkins, I think, had some flash moments last year, but ultimately, I really don't think he's a long-term, fixture in that defense. So I think in this nickel strong safety role, Brian Branch could thrive. He could give you an upgrade over Rayshawn Jenkins. But also Darius Williams, midway through this year, moved from that nickel spot to playing on the outside. And as weird as this is for a guy who's sub 5'10", he got better. He legitimately was a better perimeter corner than he was in the nickel. And the same thing happened when he was in Los Angeles with the Rams. So maybe the fix to the secondary is keeping Williams on the outside, opposite of Tyson Campbell, and then bringing in a Brian Branch here at 25. The more I think about it, the more I'm starting to fall in love with this because upgrade then at the nickel cornerback spot, but also a guy who, whether it's in rotation with or in replacement of Rayshawn Jenkins, I think there's an upgrade to be had there for Jacksonville as well. So, seeing this might be something I put in my future mocks. I just don't know if he lasts till 25. Again, one of those players I think goes a lot higher than than you see in mock drafts because it's like, where do I put this nickel corner strong safety hybrid player? I think he ultimately goes top 12 if I'm honest with you. Then we get to the Giants taking Rashee Rice. I think this is much more of a day 2 pick. Rice did look pretty good in my opinion at the Senior Bowl, but he looked good in the role that caters to his skill set, right? He's a big body guy who can work the sideline, winning contested catches, winning the air. If you're asking him to do something else than that, I'm not so sure that he's really going to hit your expectations. So I'm thinking him more of, I had him go in the second round of the Giants in my weekend's mock. I think he could certainly be there day 3 as well. So, but he does feel like the Giants wide receiver that what they wanted Kenny Golladay to be. Rashee Rice kind of feels like he could serve that role. I just think he's more of a day 2 fit. So a little bit of a reach here, but I do like to see the Giants addressing wide receiver. Then at 27, we get the Cowboys. Dalton Kincaid. Replacing one Dalton with another. Schultz is a free agent, I believe. That or he's on the last year of his deal. Sorry, I can't remember that off the top of my head. But adding another tight end to the mix, interesting. I think there's other needs in the roster that are more glaring, like adding a speed wide receiver, especially with Zay Flowers still on the board here. Please add Zay Flowers to the Dallas offense. I would be over the moon. Number 2 corner, off-ball linebacker, defensive tackle, edge depth. I think there's a myriad of places I'd rather go here than tight end. But hey, he's a really good tight end, so I can't knock it. Right now, he's my tight end too. So that video is not too far away from hitting the channel. So I guess I don't hate it, but I certainly don't love it. Then at 28, we get to the Bills at Antonio Johnson. I think this fit makes an absolute ton of sense. I've been going back and forth basically between safety and O'Cyrus Torrence, which, by the way, no O'Cyrus Torrence off the board yet. Interesting. I think I'm one of those players that plays a position that it's hard to mock, but I think he goes higher than a lot of mock drafts have him going. Case in point here. But hey, Antonio Johnson could be an upgrade over Teron Johnson in the nickel, but more so I think if he went to Buffalo, you're just adding safety depth with Jordan Poyer being a free agent, Micah Hyde wrong side of 30 coming off a scary injury. Speaking of scary injuries, DeMar Hamlin, I don't know if he ever suits up ever again. So you might be down all 3 of your safeties, like your top safeties from last year. So obviously a huge position of need, and it's a huge vital part of that Sean McDermott, Leslie Frazier defense. So yeah, I think it's totally worth a first-round selection. Bengals at 29, Cam Smith. I would love to see this. I think this guy in a Lou Anarumo defense would thrive. The ability to play man or play off. I think specifically Lou Anarumo is just such a creative DC, and honestly, I feel like he's one of the most overlooked defensive coordinators in football. Vic Fangio gets hired, and rightfully so. He's immediately kind of put in that top 5 DC conversation. And D'Amico Ryan's now a head coach, but before that, was he the best DC in football? I don't think, I'm not trying to, diminish the work those guys have brought to the table, but is Lou Anarumo not the best defensive coordinator in football? I mean, him and Dan Quinn, I don't know, especially now that Ryans is the head coach. He'll probably still call the plays for Houston's defense, but I don't know. I think there's a conversation to be had. How high does Lou Anarumo rank in regards to defensive coordinators? But anyways, not talking about that, but he does a great job being able to mix up what he's doing. Whether it's halftime or whenever they make the adjustments, he's great about making those. And Cam Smith, to me, has such a versatile skill set. Maybe not as high end of an athlete as J.C. Horn. Got into a little bit of penalty trouble this past year, more flags this year than the 2 years combined. So I think that cleans up though at the next level and getting away from South Carolina, who kind of a middle of the road SEC team, if that. So I think at the NFL level, you get that much more to Cam Smith, and seeing him go to Cincy paired up with Chidobe Awuzie on the outside, I'm absolutely here for it. Anything that allows you to move on from Eli Apple, I think, is a solid step in the right direction for Cincinnati. Then we get another trade here at 30, and this is where, like in future mocks, I'm really trying to find a way to get a mid-20s to 30s trade, because we always see one. So I really like that the 33rd team got this one in. And this is the Saints. Actually, never mind. This is just the Saints getting the first-round pick for Sean Payton. So not a trade that we don't already know about, but hey, it did play out, so that's interesting. But Andre Carter, I totally think this could be the Saints pick. I went Kalijah Kancey over the weekend, but interior defensive line to edge, I think is totally in the cards there, back half the first round. Shit, I could see New Orleans packaging that in their second rounder to move up and go getting an edge. Just the Mickey Loomis way of doing business. But if they did stick and pick here, I think they actually hold 29, I think is the actual pick they have. And if they drafted Andre Carter, I'd be here for it. He's this, kind of fringe late day one, early day two type of dude, 6'7", 260, and that with his strength, that explosiveness off the line. He is a locomotive trying to run through an offensive tackle. Does need some work coming from an academy school. Felt like he never got coached up as a pass rusher. But seeing him go to New Orleans, if they miss out on Marcus Davenport, this has been a place that has had a good track record of drafting and developing edge rushers. Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport with some years. Now we want to see, Peyton Turner. Can he take that step forward? And I think Andre Carter would be a nice fit or a nice addition into the mix there. And obviously a position that the Saints prioritize. And, like that, they like having 3 edge rushers. Carter would serve as that third. And then we get to the final pick of this mock draft, or 2. Sorry, they did include the forfeited Dolphins pick. But our Super Bowl contenders, we got the Chiefs taking DeJuan Jones. I think that makes a ton of sense. Jones to me is more of a day 2 guy, but an insane mover of people. There are not many folk built like DeJuan Jones and that can have that type of a strength profile. I said earlier that Broderick Jones might be the strongest tackle in this class. If it's not him, DeJuan Jones is probably the next guy on the list, at least when it comes to the top of my head. But yeah, also a huge hole at right tackle, which is what he played last year at Ohio State. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do with Orlando Brown Jr. on the left side. But I think this is a pretty clear upgrade over Austin Wiley at right tackle. At least it should be. Jones isn't necessarily great in pass protection, but Patrick Mahomes is so slippery in the pocket that maybe buys him some time to develop as a pass protector. But again, strong individual and one of the best movers of people in this draft class. And I think in the run game, paired up with Trey Smith next to him, Creed Humphrey, Joe Thuney, they already have a great interior offensive line for run blocking. Add Jones to the mix, and Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, all those guys have a huge smile on their face. And now the final pick of this mock draft, Bryan Bresee to the Eagles. So another draft where Bryan Bresee barely sneaks in the first round. I had him go 20 to Seattle. I think he's still there mid-late, first round conversation as opposed to the very end of the first, but I understand. Had some injury concerns, had the ACL injury, then the kidney infection, and then obviously his family tragedy that took him away from the field. So the sample size is hard to glean from, and even the production itself isn't all that impressive. Probably needs to add 15, 20 pounds worth of muscle, specifically in his lower half. But he is a high-end athlete and a highly touted recruit. I'm still a Bryan Bresee believer, but he does come with a little bit of a timeline probably, as opposed to someone like a Tyree Wilson, who we talked about earlier. I think can hit the field and give you production right away. Bresee might be a year or two away from that. So going to Philadelphia would be a really interesting spot because let's say even if they miss out on bringing back Fletcher Cox, maybe he hangs it up, especially if they win the Super Bowl. I could see Cox kind of going off in the sunset. And let's say Javon Hargrave fetches a bag from the Vegas Raiders, something like that. So then your D-tackle rotation becomes kind of work in progress, Bryan Bresee behind Milton Williams and Jordan Davis. Milton Williams hasn't necessarily been as great of a player as I was, excited about. I thought he was an insane athlete coming out of Louisiana Tech, and I thought, hey, going to Philadelphia, that's the place I want him to go. But I think even if he doesn't take a step forward, it buys Bresee some time behind Davis and Williams to kind of figure it out, gain that weight, get a little bit more muscle in his profile, and then be able to pair up with Jordan Davis moving forward, because those two as the D tackles of the future for Philly, I think there's a ton of potential. Davis is the run-stopping specialist. Bresee is the high-end athlete and the pass rush specialist from the middle. That is a really fun tandem moving forward. So I think this would be a great value add for the Eagles, and one I'm going to have to steal for my future mocks. But that is going to do it for my reaction to the 33rd team's latest 2023 NFL mock draft. Let me know what you think about the mock. I got to get my grade now. There's some questionable stuff I didn't like. I'll go with a solid 80. Like that B- grade into C+ territory. But nonetheless, even the picks I didn't like, they were all interesting. So they're kind of thought-provoking, and hey, it's February 4th when I'm recording this. So this is, draft pondering season, if you will. So I think there's some interesting fits. I just don't necessarily love the value with it. But let me know what you would grade this mock down below in the comment section. Letter grade or number grade, however you want to spin it. I am totally here for it. What fits were the most interesting? Who's your favorite team? Do you like that addition to your squad? If so, love to hear why. If not, I'd also love to hear why. But that's going to do it for today's video. Be sure to come back to the channel. Plenty more draft content on the horizon. Be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video. But that's going to do it for me. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.